Hello everybody, welcome back to a Kerbal Space Program tutorial. Today we're going over Orbital Rendezvous. Now I have done a video on this before, but it wasn't very good, so I'm going to be doing it again. We're going to cover the basics of it today, so it's nothing too complicated luckily. I think just execution is what people struggle with, but that will come with getting to know the game a bit more. These numbers, extra numbers and bits on my screen are all from a mod called Kerbal Engineer. You won't need that to help you here. I'll be using all the default tools, and this is a default craft as well. Now, let's say we wanted to rendezvous with this space station here. You can see I'm in an orbit with my craft, which is the blue line, and the station is that grey orbit line there. Now, to rendezvous, the first thing we want to do is select it as a target. So you just click on it there, and click set as target, and now it will go like a neon yellowy green colour, and you'll notice a bit more information on the orbits. Now the first thing you'll probably notice is I'm not on the same orbital inclination, which means I'm not orbiting on the same plane as my target. So if I do rendezvous with it, I'm just going to go straight past it, because as you can see, relative to the station now, I'm going to be going above it on this side of my orbit, and then back down below it again, which is no good, so we need to fix that first. Now to do this, we can use these nodes. We've got a descending node and the ascending node, and these just show you where your orbits cross, where you're going up above and down below. So first thing we're going to do is warp to near the ascending node, just about here. Here we go. And while we're waiting to come across it, we want to determine which direction to burn in. Now because it's the ascending node, we want to burn down, because we'll be going above it, relatively speaking. So we want to click the anti-normal, I believe it is, yeah. So you can see I'm facing sort of 90 degrees to my orbit, and my node's coming up now, so I'm going to burn my engines. And you'll see the node is decreasing, so I'm shifting the inclination of the orbit. I'm going to get this as close to 0 as possible. So what we're going to do next is determine how we're going to get to our station. Now you can see at the moment I'm in a lower orbit than the station, and lower orbits are always faster. This is because you need a higher velocity to maintain your orbit, whereas spacecraft in a higher orbit means it needs to go slower, and it will therefore go slower around the orbit. It's also covering more distance, and you're covering less distance if you're in a shorter orbit. Now, because we're going faster, we're actually going away from the space station here, so we need to catch up to it, and quite counterintuitively, this means we need to burn away from it. A bit of a weird thing with orbital mechanics, but there you go. So we're going to do that, but we're going to make sure that we have sunlight so we can see what we're doing. So we're going to do it here. So I'm going to come round to this part of the orbit. I'm going to warp. And you may already know this, but burning prograde on this little menu here will extend the orbit on the opposite side, because you're adding energy here, and that's going to increase your altitude here. So we're going to do that now. And you'll see, as we burn, we get these little intersect lines. Now these are comparing where your craft is and where the next craft is when you pass over them next. So you can see target position here at intersect 1, that's where the target's going to be when it crosses that line, compared to where I'll be when we cross these little nodes here. And it's 395 kilometers, which is pretty far. But because now we're intersecting the orbit, we can see what happens when we go past it. And the distance will increase because we're still in a lower orbit for a majority of the orbit there. So we will be having a higher speed. So you'll see when we cross these orange lines, the orange gap's going to increase, because it's going to show us the next orbit round. Here we go. And there we go. bigger distance now. So we need to slow our orbit down. And to do that, we'll just burn prograde again, but we'll do it on this side because this is the side we want to meet up on. So what we'll do is go to our prograde vector, increase the periapsis of our orbit until it's the apoapsis. So if we're going to flip around there, and now you can see that these two lines are getting closer together. Now I've got loads of fuel in this thing, so I can just do this straight away. But if you have quite low fuel, it's good to just get it slightly higher, wait a few orbits for them to catch up to each other, and then you can fine tune it. But I've got plenty of fuel here, so I'm just going to do it with brute force. You can see I brought it close together, but I've slightly overshot, so I'm just going to use the RCS system, which you can activate by pressing R, and you can activate these thrusters here on your ship. So make sure you put these on because they're vital for precise maneuvers. And you can use the I, K, J, L, H and N keys to move the ship. The H and N is what I'm going to use here. So if I press N, you can see the separation is decreasing because that's burning me retrograde, as you can see. So I'm going to get as close as possible. I'm now pressing H key because I need to burn prograde again. I think 1.7 kilometers is about as close as it's going to get here, but that's fine. So we're going to warp around to about here so I can run you through what to do next. And you'll see as I go up in my orbit, the station is catching us up, and then as I increase my speed again coming back down, we'll meet in roughly the same place. It'll be slightly ahead of me by the looks of it. That's fine, we can work with that. So we're here. The next thing we want to do is close in on our target. So the first thing we need to do for that is click the little menu here where it tells you our speed, surface, and now target. And we want to make our velocity to the target similar as possible, so we're not like moving quicker or slower than it, relatively speaking. So we're going to click retrograde now, and instead of pointing us along the retrograde of our orbit, it's going to point us along the retrograde of the relative velocity. So this just lets us slow down. So let's wait until we're at our closest approach. Let's warp there. Hopefully we'll see our target as well. That'd be quite nice. Should be over here somewhere ahead of us. But here we are. So you can see our target relative velocity 57 meters per second. So we're just going to lower that to as close to 0 as possible. It doesn't have to be bang on, but we want it as close as possible. Then we're going to just use the RCS for the rest of it because it's more precise. And you'll see as we lower our relative velocity, the prograde vector starts to shift away because all the smaller movements are more exacerbated. So we can use the I, J, K and L keys to just keep that in our crosshair. Do a few more puffs of the engine. Bring it back up here. A few more puffs. 0.1 is more than enough there. So now we're moving at pretty much the same speed as our target. We're going to click target here, and it's over there. Oh, you can just about see it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on YouTube, but I can see it. And you notice the speed's increasing. That's okay. That's because we're drifting around it. We're not on a perfectly similar orbit because we're not docked to it. So there's always going to be slightly different movements going on here, but that's fine. So what we're going to do now is going to use our engines here, burn towards it. You notice our prograde vector there is now near the pink circle, which shows us where our target is on our nav ball. So I've burnt, let's go 3.1 meters per second there. We can now use the translation keys on our keyboard here to just bring the prograde vector inside the target vector there. I'm also going to rotate my ship just so I understand the controls a bit better, because the rotation can mess that up a little bit. There we go. So now our prograde vector is inside that pink circle, which means we're heading straight for it. I'm going to time warp, and you'll notice it does start to drift, and that's just because we're on different orbits with slightly different speeds and slightly different altitudes and slightly different positions, so it's not going to be perfect. But as you approach, just use your translation keys, and that will increase it again. And we're going to do a nice big burn here just so it's a bit easier. And we'll time warp again, and you can see it getting closer. And we're also again drifting away, but that's okay, as long as we keep these two indicators in the same area, we'll be alright. We'll time warp a bit more. You can start to really see it now. I'm going to do one more correction here. I'm going to turn on the stability assist as well, because I'm going to slow down soon. We're just going to keep those two markers inside of each other for now. I'm going to start to slow down, so I'm going to use the RCS again for this. It just means I don't have to keep turning around. It just makes it a lot easier to maintain your approach. We'll do about 4.5 meters per second. Bring it in a bit more. Use the time warp if you feel like it, and here we are. So now we're going to use the RCS to slow down completely. Here we go, we've met it in space. Now, I don't know if I've got a docking port. It looks like I do. Docking can be really difficult. Sometimes Rendezvous gets picked up really easily. Docking can be very, very hard. There's a few methods I can run you through. First one is switch to your target vehicle by pressing the square bracket key on your keyboard. You can select the target port you want to dock to. Let's say we wanted to dock to this one here. Click Control from here. Then select the other docking port as a target and click Target here. And it's going to rotate that docking port in such a way that you can meet. It's going to point the docking port towards the ship that you want to dock with, right? Then you switch to the other craft and do the same thing. So you'll set that docking port as the target. You'll click Target. Get your docking port ready if it needs to be opened. And now they're both pointing at each other, and all you have to do is burn towards the docking port and make sure you're heading straight towards it. That's all you need to do. This is quite an easy way of docking. If you're docking two spacecraft together that have good maneuverability, this is a nice, easy way of docking. And you want to slow down here because you're still going to have to make a few corrections. I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to make sure this is still facing the target. You might have to switch back and forth sometimes, but no, looks like it's all good so far. Also want to make sure that this is still on top. And you'll see it's the easiest thing ever. All you have to do is go towards it. You can see I'm perfectly lined up. Look at that. Easiest thing ever. And boom. We're docked. Now, let's say that, let's get to the sunlight. Let's say we're building a station or something like that. And you want to have the station facing a specific way all the time, because maybe you want the solar panels to face the sun, for example. There's a way to dock to that too. So we're going to undock, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Where is it? Where's my undock button? There it is. So we're going to undock, we're going to bring the spacecraft away, and I'm going to show you another method. So let's switch this station to face. Let's do radial out, because that's what we're close to anyway. Unless, oh no, because it's controlling from there. So I'm gonna quickly just switch the control back to here. Control from here. Is it gonna let me, or do I need to use this? Yeah, my bad. Just gonna let it do its thing. There we go. I'm just gonna rotate it as well, so it's nice and even. Okay, so let's say I've got my space station set up so that I always want it facing outwards. That's fine. We can dock to that too. We set the docking port as a target, and then we see on our orbit what that lines up with. So we can see that's a retrograde for us. So we click retrograde, and you can see we'll be lined up along that axis. So now all we have to do is use the RCS controls once again. seem to be out of monopropellant. This is going to make it very difficult. Actually, let's do this quickly just for tutorial's sake. There is a cheats menu, guys. Don't freak out. We'll do this quickly. There we go. Got my monopropellant back. So now what we have to do is line ourselves up this way. It's just about finding out which of these nodes lines up with the docking port that we're on. And this only works if your station is also holding one of these nodes. So that's important to remember. So what we're doing here is lining ourselves up. We're going to start heading towards the station again, and we're going to use the engines to push ourselves up like this. Just going to give a big puff of those engines because I don't want to waste too much time here. It's good to just take it slow as well. If you're really uncomfortable with docking and the controls, you just need to take it slowly, and it will get easier as you go. You'll get more familiar with it. You can see here I'm just making small corrections to make sure I'm lined up. Once I'm going to get closer, I'm going to slow down, and you just want to use your camera just to check all your angles and make sure that you are lined up. I'm just going to move this over again. I'm going to give it another puff of the engines because we're going a bit slowly for my preference. And you want to use small presses, just makes it easier to correct. I'm going to slow it down again. I'm going to check and see I'm off this way. So I'm going to try and correct this first. See, that's probably a bit better. It's good to keep an eye on it though. You don't know how much you're going to drift by. You can also see I'm off this way. So we're going to increase our thrust this way. We're going to counteract it again. You always have to counteract any force that you make if you want to make a correction, because obviously there's no air resistance up here. You can see I'm quite fast. I'm going to slow it down just so I can make any final corrections. And docked. There we go. Fantastic. That's what you like to see. So those are two docking methods. That's also how you rendezvous. If you've got any questions, you can always leave a comment. I'll do my best to answer. Hopefully this is helpful.